why would I get married? Why?
Yeah.
There's no actual reason to get married. It can complicate things. I have some friends that just have a woman they love and they had kids and they just didn't get married. I find them happier than those that get married.
There's something about it. I don't know what it is, but I feel like once you put the marriage title on it, there's just this
like
added pressure
too, right?
that like the relationship doesn't need.
Did you hear about this new food that like completely destroys sex drive in women?
No.
Wedding cake.
So this guy, Kinobody, is saying that in his mind, there's no reason to get married because he sees that his friends that are essentially living as a unit, having kids, buying a house, but not actually getting married, are happier than folks that actually tied the knot. And a lot of people in the under 40 age group at this point feel this way. Probably they see high rates of divorce, which is true. We can agree on that. The rates of divorce are insanely high. If anything, it's more than half at this point. So, you know, and you're looking at people, you might meet somebody that is divorced. I'm divorced. My first couple of years of divorce and custody were crazy and hard and terrible. And so like if you're somebody and you're now in love with a woman or you're in love with a man and you see that, why they kind of, you know, if you think about it, devil's advocate, as people that are biased toward family, they do have the right to be concerned.
Okay. They have a right to be concerned. I'm concerned. We're all concerned. It's something to be concerned about. But you have to row your boat in the right direction if you're eventually going to reach land. Just randomly rowing it in any direction, you can end up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean without any resources. Okay, so let's start. Number one, his statement that most of my friends are not happy who are married and ones who aren't married are, first thing, that's factually incorrect. Years and years of research is documented in books, it's documented in research studies, all prove conclusively, there isn't even a debate in this, that this study says this way. This study, people who are married are happier. They live longer. They recover from illnesses quicker. They report satisfaction in life. So he's talking through his hat. It could be it's honest from his point of view, but his circle of friends is a subset of married individuals, like the kind of people that he's hanging out with. It's possible that they're not representative of the general population. But from research, it's without a doubt, marriage has a huge advantage over people who are single in financially, in just every way, success in every kind of measurement. Okay, let's set that aside. It's an important point, and I'm just setting it aside because that's the first thing to make that correction. And I'll just add something next to that, which you mentioned, there's so much divorce. Yes, people need to be concerned. But the reason there's divorce is because people don't know how to be married. Divorce is not because you're married. Divorce is because you don't know how to behave when you're married. And that's a critical point. But what I really want to say about this, the way they're talking about having girlfriends or being married, what's the point of being married? My impression basically is when they look at a woman, they see it as kind of a woman as a sex toy. It's an opportunity to enhance your masturbation. And that's all they expect in a relationship with a woman. And if that's how they're looking at life or a relationship, yeah, you could ask the question, why should I marry? The old joke, the saying, if you can get the milk for free, why buy the cow? And that's all another story. We can talk about why it's like that and why women allow themselves to be in that situation. And there are reasonable reasons, but it unfortunately is representative of a greater tragedy going on in society as a whole. But nonetheless, these guys cannot see, seems to me, past the end of their nose. What is a marriage? And that they don't address because I believe they probably don't even recognize. They didn't see it in their parents. They don't see it amongst their friends. A marriage is an opportunity to unify in a natural way with a woman, a man and a woman together. in what we typically refer to as intimacy is the most natural thing in the world. Just like a positive magnet is attracted to a negative magnet, it automatically does it. It's hardwired to do that. A man and a woman are wired to connect. The sexual part, the initial infatuation or sexual experiences, it just gets the process started. It's called dating. But beyond that point, once a person is married, what is marriage? It doesn't mean that, you got a piece of paper saying you're married. What it really represents is a spiritual entity where you are now unifying yourself, not just in a physical way. I mean, even when people get married and then have sex, if they don't have sex before marriage, initially, once they're married, they have sex, but they're not unified in an emotional way, in a mental way, in a spiritual way. That can only develop when there's a security within the relationship. I would never if I was a millionaire, I would look for a very stable bank to hold my money. If a bank popped up last week in some sort of very primitive third world country, I would never in my right mind give them my $1 million. I don't know if they'll be there tomorrow to make a withdrawal. It's the same thing with investing in two human beings investing in one another. And a man needs this as much as a woman, investing in one another. That can only happen when there's security and stability and consistency. And that's what marriage represents. It's not the paper. What it is this contract. I will stay with you, barring some very extreme situations. We're tethered together for life. I taking my $1 million and I'm putting it in the Bank of America because I know the Bank of America has been there for 125 years. And I know they're going to be there still when they put me in the ground. You're the bank I'll give my money to. You're the man, you're the woman I'll give my heart to. So instead of being stuck in this masturbating cycle, okay, I masturbated with this redhead, I've been done with her. 3 months later, I'm going to masturbate with a blonde hair, blue-eyed girl, and then I'm done with her. Now I'll maybe masturbate with this gorgeous brunette. And by the way, she's 3 years younger than the redhead I had. This is even a bonus. Building a life with someone, sharing experiences, being together, crying together, laughing together, having children, watching them grow up, pulling your hair out when they misbehave, kissing them when they give you pleasure and make you proud, and then having grandchildren, having a reason to get out of bed in the morning. You're retired, but you want to get up and see your grandkids or speak on the phone or have a Zoom call or send a birthday present or go visit them for a holiday. That's what gives you meaning in your 70s and 80s. Not that, I can give you a list of 20,000 girls I masturbated with, and now I'm sitting in this beautiful condo all by myself at 80 years old, scratching my rear end trying to figure out how I'm going to fill my day.
So the idea and the joke that he made, or if you can call it a joke even, that a wedding cake is food that causes women to lose sex drive, which, is pretty, I think joke is too high of a compliment for that. I think from what you're saying, it goes back to the idea of not having the skills to be married, because if your marriage is a marriage, that doesn't happen unless there's actual reasons for it to happen, right? Like, and it goes back to this whole point you're making, which is you're when you're talking the way you're talking about having a sex object for yourself, basically a sex doll that you live with, versus like a woman and that you are in a marriage with. So when I hear this idea that people in my age group are thinking that, well, if I get married or, at some point the sex drive is why are you worried about that? And because previously when we talked about an Andrew Tate clip, you had mentioned about attraction, and it sounds like what you're essentially getting at is that is your mission. You need to always be emotionally attractive.
And that only comes by investing in one another. And nobody would invest in one another if there isn't security, reasonable permanence. and that's represented by being married. Now, people who are common law married, I consider that more or less marriage. Marriage is the actual paper, formal ceremony, making a statement to your community that we're hitched, is an enhancement. It's like you can buy a car with all the whistles and bells, or you can get a basic model. People who are living together and having children should not feel they're deficient because they don't have the license. They have the commitment. That's why when I write articles or books, I always talk about it as in a committed relationship or a marriage. They're very much equivalent. A marriage is just the whistles and bells. It's the commitment that is the core of this. And when there's a commitment that I will stay with you, I will weather life's storms with you, I will help you when you're down and out. I know you will help me when I'm down and out, and we will celebrate together our successes. That is marriage.
So we saw a clip, and in the YouTube age, clips can make their way around and things can seem practical. And when you say 90 minutes and you say 1 or 2 dates a week, like at least the thing is, versus some other clips we've watched and reacted to, at least there's some advice, right? There's advice in it, and that's something practical. So you can see why people listen to it. But as a clinician, is what he's saying enough to keep a marriage alive?
I think that what he's saying is good, sound advice. It's a foundation. However, the devil is in the details, and that's very, very important. To advise a couple to spend 90 minutes a week talking to one another and a date or two a week as advisable is very good practical advice. But it's not where most couples are starting out. Most couples have very personal issues going on, whether it simply is a work schedule. A person that has business out of town should not feel that somehow if he can't have date night with his wife, he cannot have a good marriage. Or if she goes out of town on business, whatever it is, there's workarounds, there's creativity, there's being out of the box. And also, unfortunately, many couples suffer from being angry with one another, disillusioned with one another. They don't trust one another. So these are issues that have to first be resolved before they can spend time together. Otherwise, they're just going to throw emotional daggers at each other. They go to a restaurant and sit across the table. They're going to be, looking at each other and saying, why am I sitting here with my enemy eating a steak? It's something that just cannot work. People will not have the feeling to spend time together. So it's like planting a garden. You have to initially assess the land where you're going to put the plants on. You're planting. You have to see, are there rocks? You have to take out the rocks. If there's weeds, you have to take out the weeds. If there's oil, you have to somehow clean the soil or replace the soil. It's the same idea here. What Jordan Peterson's talking about is the ideal, and it's excellent advice. But that only works when there's couples that have the time to do that and when they have a reasonably comfortable relationship, a happy relationship. Many, many couples do not have that, sadly. And that has to be addressed first so they have a desire to spend time together. That desire, that attraction for one another has to be rekindled.
As men, sometimes we see things and sometimes we get this inspiration or flash of inspiration of being vulnerable and emotional and, maybe saying, like, this is how I feel like I'm not spending enough time with you. But sometimes it's hard to do that. And a lot of men in this, like we said, under 40, maybe even under 50, who have been seeing such news about, traditional roles being challenged and not even just knowing what their wife or wants at this point. How do you get to that point where you tell your wife that I want to get this better, I want to make this better, and she may be, you may be 3 years, 9 years, 15, 25 years into this, and might be some, as you mentioned about planting, there might be some crud on things, but is it ever too late?
It's never too late. And standing on your soapbox with a bullhorn and making a proper proclamation, I want to make it better, is most likely to lead to an argument. because then the question becomes, whose fault is it? Who has to make the correction? Who has to make the adjustment? It's simply not a practical approach. A better approach is to get a clear idea of what your wife wants, what your wife needs. If it's a woman, clear understanding of what your husband wants, what he needs, and what is essentially that we're talking about gender wisdom, understanding the differences from a man to a woman. Typically, if I'm a man, I think all people, women included, are like men. If I'm a woman, I typically think all people are like a woman, because that's what I know. Probably to a dog, every animal with 4 legs is some version of being a dog. Well, we have to get out of that mindset and understand what's gender wisdom. And what's the reason? Because you have to understand what your partner is naturally looking for. You're working with human nature here. You don't talk somebody into liking you. You don't say, I don't think you love me enough. From now on, can you please try to love me more? That can't work. It never worked. It's not natural. We're talking about attraction based on the natural desires of the animal part of the human being. A person has the soul part, they have the animal part. Marriage is 98% animal part. And just like somebody's attracted to a mango and repulsed by celery, you can't talk it into the reverse. I want you to hate mangoes and love celery. It doesn't work that way. If you want that person to sit at your table and eat, serve a mangoes, not celery. So a man has to understand what his woman naturally wants and provides it. A woman has to know what her husband naturally wants and provide it. And when the needs are being attended to, then there's a natural gratitude and a comfort level and a closeness. And that's how people pull together. And there's the converse, which is also the negative, such as anger or betrayal, which work in the opposite direction. So whatever closeness there is, it gets pulled in the other way. It gets pushed apart, the relationship. It's like a wedge between the two of them. So you have to factor in both. There has to be the movement to get close, and there has to be also the effort to avoid any kind of an imposition that can divide the two of them.